I've always been an intensely private person. That's a big part of why I've sat on this story for as long as I have. The last thing I'd want is for this to somehow be traced back to me. But I've been thinking about it lately, about how it'd be a shame to take this to the grave without putting it out there. So here goes. About 10 years ago, I was doing a solo road trip from West Patterson, New Jersey, all the way down to Fort Worth, Texas. I was going to visit my parents, hadn't seen them in a while, and the trip was long overdue. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, I think it was either Arkansas or just over the Oklahoma border, I honestly can't remember exactly. My car started acting up. I held out as long as I could, but eventually I had to pull over. Nothing around me but trees, open fields, and an empty road stretching out behind me. I popped the hood and started poking around like I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I was basically killing time. My plan was to look busy for a few minutes, admit defeat, and then call for roadside assistance, which I was annoyed about because I knew it was going to cost me. A few minutes in, a white pickup truck pulled up behind me. Nothing distinctive about it. I remember noticing it didn't have a front license plate, or at least not one I could see. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He looked like he was in his mid-30s, maybe slightly older, but worn in a way that aged him. He had curly hair, a long unkempt beard that hadn't seen a trimmer in a while, and the look of someone who worked with their hands for a living. Honestly, he kind of looked like an older, rougher version of me. Same height, same build, same hair color, just less put together. He walked over slowly, already scanning my engine before I'd even said anything. He didn't ask if I needed help. He just assumed it and started looking. I told him what had happened and thanked him for stopping. He said he was a mechanic, and judging by how quickly he got to work, I had no reason to doubt him. After a minute or two of looking things over, he stepped back and gave the engine a look that didn't exactly fill me with confidence. He said something about needing a compression tester, that without it the car wasn't going to start regardless. Then he mentioned that a buddy of his, also a mechanic, might be able to bring one out. I had no idea what a compression tester even was, but the guy seemed genuine, so I went with it. He pulled out his phone to make the call, then froze, stared at the screen for a few seconds, then put it back in his pocket and said the battery was dead. Asked if he could borrow mine. I didn't even hesitate. I just handed it to him. He took it with one hand, and in almost the same motion reached into his jacket with the other and pulled out a gun. He told me to sit down on the shoulder and not do anything stupid. His voice was calm, steady. This wasn't someone in a panic. This felt practiced. He went through my pockets, took my wallet, grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat, had me give him my phone password. Then he got back in his truck and drove off. Just like that. I know I'm telling this calmly now, but I was absolutely furious in the moment. I don't think I've ever been that angry in my entire life. Eventually, someone did stop and help me. They got my car running and were even kind enough to give me directions all the way to my parents' house so I could make it without a phone. I got to Fort Worth that night, and all things considered, the visit with my parents was actually really good. The following weeks were a blur, canceling cards, replacing my ID, updating every password and account I had. It was tedious and time-consuming, but I eventually got myself squared away and moved on, or so I thought. About 6 months later, a letter showed up in my mailbox from a bank I'd never heard of. It was addressed to me, thanking me for opening a new line of credit. I figured it was junk mail, spam, tossed it aside. Then another one arrived, this time from Best Buy, about a card I'd supposedly opened that already had over $1,000 charged to it. All the charges were from a random town in Tennessee. I was confused at first, and then it hit me. My social security card, it had been in my wallet. The man who robbed me on that highway now had everything he needed to become me. The next month of my life was a nightmare. My credit report was a disaster. Hard inquiries, new accounts, balances I'd never touched. Every time I thought I'd gotten a handle on it, something new showed up. I filed a report with the FTC, placed fraud alerts with all three credit bureaus, froze my credit, went to the police and gave them everything I had, but without a name, without a plate number. They said their hands were tied. I filed the report anyway just to have a paper trail, and I reached out to police departments in every city where the fraud activity had originated. I did everything by the book, and it still kept escalating. A few weeks later, my health insurance provider called me. Someone had received emergency care at a hospital in Georgia under my name. This wasn't just a billing problem anymore. There were now medical records in my file that didn't belong to me. Records that could actually do real damage if I ever ended up in a hospital and couldn't speak for myself. That was the last straw. I reported everything to the police again out of Jackson, Tennessee. Some guy selling a bunch of used power tools and miscellaneous items. Something about it nagged at me. The more I looked, the more it clicked. The items matched up almost perfectly with purchases that had been charged to the Best Buy card. I reached out, kept it simple, said I was interested in a couple items and asked if they were still available. I thought about trying to get clever with a tracker link or something like that, but I didn't want to spook him. If this was the guy and he caught even a whiff that someone was onto him, he'd disappear. He didn't seem suspicious at all. Over the next few days, we went back and forth over email, and he eventually gave me a time and a public place to meet, told me to bring cash. I seriously considered driving down to Tennessee myself, but I stopped myself, because honestly, there's no telling what I would have done to that man if I'd come face to face with him a second time. So instead, I called the Jackson Police Department to see if they had any record of my case. They did, and I basically laid out everything I had and pleaded with them to help me. By some miracle, they said the details lined up well enough to be worth looking into. They'd show up at the meetup spot and at minimum have a conversation with him. The next day, I got the guy to confirm he'd be in a red pickup truck. I passed that to the police, and then I waited 4 hours. When they finally called me back, I nearly fell to my knees. The moment the guy spotted police cars near the meetup location, he floored it out of the parking lot. Didn't even try to act casual. That alone gave officers legal grounds to pursue him. Not long after, he lost control of the truck and crashed into a ditch. Minor accident, but enough to get officers directly involved. According to them, he was a total wreck, shaking, rambling, talking in circles. The second they brought up the Best Buy merchandise, he folded, said the stuff wasn't his, that a friend had given it to him, and that he'd just decided to resell it. He ratted out everyone involved, and with his cooperation, the police were able to gather enough evidence to arrest the person who had actually robbed me. I'm going to keep things vague from here on out. I meant what I said at the beginning about my privacy. But I will say this, the guy who robbed me wasn't working alone. There were 3 of them total, and I wasn't the only victim. From what I was told, they'd been targeting lone travelers and isolated drivers along several interstate corridors through the South for quite some time. Eventually, all 3 were caught, charged, and sent to prison. Justice was served, and I can finally say I've put it to rest.